At exactly 10 p.m., he died, every single day. But at 7 a.m., he came back. That was the daily routine of Xong Lee, an apparently ordinary 32-year-old man living in Fresno, California. But what happened to his body between nightfall and sunrise defied every known medical explanation. It wasn't just a fainting spell, nor a neurological blackout. Xong was declared clinically dead. No pulse, no brain activity, full rigor mortis, and yet every morning he would wake up as if nothing had happened. In 1981, his story became an unsolvable mystery for the medical community. Hospitals filled with specialists, priests were called, bizarre theories emerged. But no one could explain how a man could die and come back to life every day at the exact same time. If you're drawn to real stories that defy logic, subscribe to this channel now. But be warned, what you're about to hear isn't science fiction. It's a documented case. And every detail, from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., reveals something stranger than the last. Xong Lee worked as a mechanic in Fresno, California. A father of 2 young children and a devoted husband, he lived a simple life until the night of June 17, 1981. It was his wife, May, who noticed it first. At exactly 10:13 p.m. that night, Xong was lying in bed reading a book when he simply stopped. The room fell into complete silence. She thought he had fallen asleep, but something felt off. He wasn't breathing. May rushed to him and tried to wake him. Nothing. Terrified, she checked his pulse. Nothing. He was cold, rigid. His lips were starting to darken. Panicked, she called the paramedics. They arrived in 9 minutes. Tried to resuscitate him, used a defibrillator, injections, chest compressions. The verdict? Time of death, 10:38 p.m. But at 6:55 the next morning, May screamed so loudly she woke the neighbors. Xong was sitting up in bed, blinking slowly, like someone waking from a deep sleep. He asked why there was so much noise. She didn't know whether to cry or faint. May thought she was losing her mind. But this wasn't a nightmare. That same night, at 10:04 p.m., it happened again, and the next day, again, and again after that. Always at the same time, always the same pattern. Apparent death, unexplained return. May started documenting everything. She filmed videos, took photos. She took Xong to the hospital, St. Agnes Medical Center. Doctors suspected extreme narcolepsy, or catalepsy, but he didn't show the typical signs. Monitored overnight by a medical team, what they witnessed was disturbing. At 10:06 p.m., his blood pressure dropped. At 10:09, his heartbeat stopped. At 10:10, his brainwaves flatlined, clinically and legally, dead. They stayed with him until 7 a.m. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. And then, as if someone flipped a switch, the heartbeat returned. His temperature rose. He opened his eyes. The entire hospital froze that morning. The clinical director wrote in his report, "Patient exhibits complete cessation of all vital functions during nighttime hours, followed by spontaneous return with no medical intervention. No plausible scientific explanation available." It went on like this for 9 nights. Xong was transferred to a special unit for continuous observation. On the morning of the 10th day, a neurologist asked to speak with him. Xong was calm, almost bored. He said, "I dream that I'm dead, standing still, watching people cry, but I can't touch them. I can't speak." The neurologist asked, "And how do you come back?" He replied, "I just wake up, like my body is waiting for the sun." That sentence stuck with the doctors. Waiting for the sun. No one knew what it meant. But one thing was certain. Xong was dying every night, and waking up alive every morning. And with each return, he seemed weaker, as if each death took a piece of him away. It was as if an invisible switch shut everything off inside him, and always at the exact same minute, at precisely 10 p.m., Song's gaze would drift. He'd blink slowly and vanish, not with a gasp, not in pain. He would simply disappear. One resident doctor described it like this: It's like watching someone melt from the inside. The eyes lose their shine, the face relaxes, the heart gives up. Xong was now being studied by neurologists, cardiologists, sleep physiologists, even military specialists. Every night, his bed became a scientific war zone. Sensors hooked to his brain, chest, pupils, thermal cameras, electrical activity monitors, and every night, at 10 p.m. sharp, he shut down. The consistency was terrifying. It didn't vary by a single second, like a biological death clock. In an attempt to stop the collapse, they tried to keep him awake. They injected stimulants, blasted loud noises, kept bright lights on in the room. At 9:59 p.m., he was still fine. But at exactly 10 o'clock, even while being forced to keep his eyes open, his body gave in. He collapsed sideways. Heart stopped. Brain dead. Nothing could stop the death. Speculation began to swirl. Could it be temporary lethal epilepsy? An unknown form of metabolic shutdown? Or something beyond science? Some whispered of a curse. Local newspapers ran bold headlines. The man who dies every night. Medical mystery in Fresno. The Xong Lee case. The pressure kept mounting, and the days kept passing. Xong woke up paler each morning. Dark circles under his eyes. Light sensitive. Hypersensitive to touch. And slowly, something else began to surface. He started to remember, not just dream, like before. Now, he described in detail what he saw on the other side. It's a gray room, no windows, voices whispering, but there's no sound. Someone's watching me, an old man. He just stands there, staring. Doctors tried to explain it as post-brain death hallucinations, but Xong always described the place the same way. With disturbing precision, even specific objects, a cracked picture frame, a bed with blue sheets, a stain on the ceiling, things he had never seen while alive. Until one detail chilled the investigators to the bone. Xong described a small crack in the corner of the hospital ceiling, but on the floor below his room. Days later, they took him down there, and there it was. The exact same crack, in the exact same spot. How did he know? Panic began creeping into the team. The lead neurologist wrote in his report, "We are no longer dealing solely with a physiological event. We are facing a rupture between biology and the unexplainable." And with each nightly return, Xong described more. He started naming names, repeating phrases, describing faces. And then a pattern emerged. Every person he claimed to see had died in that same wing of the hospital, and he knew exactly how each one had passed. The medical staff became divided between fear and skepticism. But one detail would change everything. On the 14th night, Xong woke up in a panic. "Tonight I almost didn't come back," he said. "I saw the old man wave, and this time I heard him. He said, 'One more night, and you stay.'" It was the first time Xong showed fear. Until then, he had seemed oddly accepting of his condition. But that night, he cried like a child. Something was changing. And maybe, in that invisible countdown of nightly deaths, he was running out of chances. On the morning after the 16th night, a doctor noticed something that had gone unseen until then. Xong woke up with slightly stiff fingers. The tip of his right thumbnail was dark, as if the tissue had started to necrotize, to truly die. But minutes later, when touched by the morning sun through the window, the color returned to normal. It was as if Song's body had decided to die, but something was forcing it to come back. The hospital ordered more aggressive testing. Biopsies were performed. The results were unsettling. The skin cells showed markers typically associated with decomposition. Enzymes like caspase3, linked to apoptosis or programmed cell death, were active. And yet, the body was functional, alive, a biological paradox. One resident referred to the phenomenon as reversible necrosis. But among the more skeptical staff, another term took hold: phantom death. By the 20th day, Xong began showing cold zones across his body. Areas of his torso and legs would lose temperature during the night and take hours to warm up by morning. It was as if his blood circulation refused to fully return. But the strangest event was still to come. On the 22nd night, when nurses came to prepare the body after his temporary death, they noticed the blood in his veins had clotted, as if he had been dead for days. When he came back at 7:03 a.m., Xong screamed in agony. He cried, begged them not to let him sleep again that night. For the first time, he asked for help. He said the old man in the gray room was now walking toward him. "He's closer. Yesterday, I smelled him. He smells like old wood and wet floor." His description was so vivid that the medical team began to suspect something far deeper. What if his body was truly undergoing the death process every night? What if Song's consciousness was being trapped in some kind of limbo? They began consulting experts in thanatology, the study of death. One of them, Dr. Howard Renwick, suggested a radical test. Let's treat Song's body as if it were actually dead, even though he comes back. Let's measure the residual damage, just like with a real corpse. They began monitoring gas levels in his blood. The data was shocking. Carbon dioxide concentrations equivalent to postmortem bodies, and even more disturbing, a complete absence of oxygen for hours without any visible brain damage. Xong should have been permanently dead, but he wasn't. Yet with every return, parts of his body seemed less alive. His hair began to fall out, his skin turned waxy pale, his pupils contracted slowly, and still he spoke, thought, remembered, as if his consciousness was more alive than the body it inhabited. On the 25th day, he woke up unable to move his left leg, partial paralysis, and this time, recovery didn't come with the sunrise. The neurologist wrote, "Song's death is no longer a reversible cycle. Now each night takes something permanent. We are witnessing a man decompose while alive." A painful dilemma emerged. Should they let him sleep again, or try to keep him awake at any cost? His wife, May, was emotionally wrecked. "He says he dreams of our son, but the son is with the old man. The man says he's going to teach our son how to wait, too." No one knew what that meant. But everyone began to fear the 10th death, or the 30th. Which one would be the last? Or worse, what if, one day, Xong didn't return, but something else did? It was impossible to ignore. Xong was deteriorating. His eyes were sunken, his skin cold and translucent. He barely spoke, ate little, sweat thin streaks of blood. By that point, no one spoke of treatment anymore. They spoke of vigil. That's when Dr. Ezra Klein entered the picture, a geriatrician, philosopher of death, and specialist in end-of-life patients. Upon arriving, he asked only one question. "Have you ever tried waiting?" Waiting for what? He explained, "Everyone here is trying to stop Xong from dying. But maybe what we need is to observe death completely, without interruption." For the first time, the medical team considered letting Xong die with no resuscitation, no monitoring, no cameras, no medication. His wife was consulted. Through tears, she said, "If he doesn't come back, at least he'll be free." The night was scheduled, July 12, 1981, the 29th death. The night of the waiting, Dr. Klein entered the room at 9:30 p.m. He carried only a notebook and a lit candle. At exactly 10 p.m., Gong looked directly at the doctor. "He's here. He's at the door." And then he collapsed, dead. But that night, no one tried to bring him back. Klein sat by the bed, candle flickering, and documented every minute. At 10:30, no changes. At 11:10, rigidity increased. At 12:40 a.m., his body temperature had dropped sharply. At 2 o'clock, Song's eyes were void of any light. The doctor whispered, "We're listening to you. even from there. Then, something changed. At 4:17 a.m., the monitor, which wasn't even supposed to be on, beeped. A pulse. Faint. Slow. At 5:02, his fingers twitched. At 6:13, Xong opened his eyes. Slowly, he looked at Dr. Klein and said, "He didn't come in because you were here." Klein, stunned, asked, "Who is he, Xong?" He replied in a fading voice, "Death, but not ours. The death of the soul. He only takes those who die alone." It was the last full sentence Xong ever spoke. The next day, he didn't wake up. He remained lying there, dead. For 24 hours, doctors officially declared him dead at 10 p.m. on July 13th, but at 6:55 a.m. on July 14th, he came back, and this time, something was different. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, but he smiled, as if he had won. Or as if he had seen something we would never understand. In the weeks that followed, the episodes began to lessen. First, he was dead for 9 hours, then 7, then 5, until a month later, he didn't die anymore. Medical tests showed something astonishing. All functions were stable. His blood was clean, his skin returning to normal color, his pupils responding properly. It was as if his body had reset itself. Dr. Klein wrote in the final report. Song's death was not biological. It was spiritual, symbolic, a cycle that needed to be fulfilled so that his soul could be freed from something we'll never understand. Song's medical file was archived under a special code, non-traumatic intermittent resurrection. And although he survived, he was never quite the same. He spent his days in silence, writing letters he never mailed, listening to old radio static, talking to the sunset. A neighbor would later say, "He looked at the sky like he recognized someone, like he was waiting for the old man to return." Xong Lee survived, but he never lived the same way again. After his final return on August 14th, 1981, he walked out the front door of the hospital with clean test results, no physical after effects, and an impossible medical diagnosis, recurring spontaneous resurrection with full remission. Newspapers wanted interviews, TV networks offered contracts, but he turned them all down. He moved with his wife and children to a secluded house in the Sierra Nevada mountains, far from schedules, far from clocks, far from 10 p.m. Xong began waking up before sunrise. He made herbal tea, walked barefoot through the wet grass, and watched the morning like someone returning from a place no one should ever go. His nearest neighbor described him like this: "He was kind, quiet, but his eyes, they held something, like he had buried someone inside himself." Every night he lit a single candle on the porch and sat there, in silence, until sunrise. May later shared that he began keeping a journal, but in another language, symbols, codes, reversed sentences. She never read it, said it was his alone. The children grew up and left home. Xong aged slowly, peacefully, but he never went to bed before 10:30 p.m. And every morning, as he made coffee, he would murmur the same phrase. One more morning, one less funeral. Was it a joke? A ritual? No one knows. In 1998, Xong passed away in his sleep. No pain, no warning. At age 49, his heart stopped at exactly 10 p.m. And this time, he didn't come back. May said she found him smiling, the candle still burning in his hand, and beside the bed a note. "If I don't return, it's because I went whole." This time, without leaving pieces behind, Xong Lee died more than 30 times, but he was only buried once. Between 1981 and 1998, he lived with one foot in the invisible. He faced death in a way few ever have and came back to tell the tale. But what he truly saw during those nights, no one ever found out, not even science. The hospital archived the case. The doctors moved on with their lives. But Zhang's journal disappeared after his death. And to this day, in obscure medical forums and thanatology congresses, his name still surfaces. Like a ghost in records no one can explain. Was it a miracle? An unknown condition? Or a reminder that maybe life doesn't end when everything stops? We're left with silence, and with a question that may never have an answer. What if one day at 10 p.m. you shut down too, and no one knew if you'd return by morning? Xong faced that abyss and came back whole, or almost whole. If this story left a mark on you, subscribe. Medicine still holds secrets that defy logic, biology, and time.